not being reasonable. You're being ridiculous. Give me a thank you. Give me a thank you for feminists for getting your right to vote. Otherwise, stop voting and go make me a ham sandwich.
I did read Sam Harris. I read his long response to critics. I read his most recent blog. I read all of that. And I don't think that I have misrepresented his views at all.
It's just, yeah, that's what it is. We're apologists for fucking rapers. That's what we are.
This storm is coming, I know those times.
The Young Turks. What happened? The biggest news network on YouTube has become a total shit show. TYT, or the Tits as I like to call them, seem to have more ex-viewers than viewers these days, and former fans are wondering, did they change or did we? Were they always this bad, or did we just now notice it?
Go back and watch some of their stuff from about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. It's pretty reasonable. And
I
now,
disagree.
of course,
I think you've changed.
So what's the answer? Is it them or us? Can TYT be saved, or are they a hopeless case? As someone who has been following their trajectory for years, I will try to answer this question. The Young Turks started out in 2002 as a radio show, in which Cenk Uygur and Ben Mankiewicz talked about politics. In 2006 they moved the format to YouTube, becoming one of the earliest YouTube news channels. Ben, who is the more level-headed of the two, left in 2007 to pursue a bigger career in media, although he remained a regular host on the show. Cenk carried on as the head of the operation, becoming the biggest tit, in every sense of the word. The show is molded around his personality, and that's its biggest strength, but also its biggest weakness. Cenk is a charming and entertaining guy, and has a pretty astute grasp of American politics, but he also possesses several personality flaws that are extremely problematic to anyone who wants to be taken seriously as a media figure. I subscribed to TYT in late 2009. Back then, this was the place to go if you were a liberal, the place where you could get news and commentary from a left-wing perspective and discuss it in the comment section. I loved the show at first, because Cenk and his gang of bouncy tits offered a combination of humor and reasonable liberal views, but after about a year I unsubscribed, because I couldn't take the bullshit anymore. Almost all the problems that are so glaringly obvious today were present even back then. Allow me to list the major ones. Let's go back to 2010. One moment I remember from that year was when Cenk interviewed the chairman of Go Proud, an organization that tried to push for gay rights in the Republican Party.
For more on this, let's turn to the chairman of the board of Go Proud, Christopher Barron. All right, Chris, first, let me get it out of the way. Why on God's green earth are you even a Republican?
So Cenk opens by saying let's just get it out of the way, but then spends the entire interview, 5 minutes, trying to convince Barron that he is wrong to affiliate with the Republicans.
You gotta wake up, man. In 2004, they ran a whole national campaign against hating you. In 2006, they ran a whole national campaign against hating you.
This goes completely against what I believe in. For me, politics isn't about winning elections, it's about getting your ideas to prevail. The biggest victory is when the opposing party adopts my ideas. So any group that fights for acceptance of gay rights in conservative parties has my full blessings and support. But for Cenk, it's always about us against them. Our party are the good guys, the other party are the bad guys, so his main goal is to convert people to his party. This us versus them mentality leads to another problem: generalization. When Cenk discusses something bad done by a right-winger, he'll usually present it as representative of all right-wingers. It's always, see how they act. And this leads straight to another very prevalent fault in Cenk's rhetoric: straw-manning. This was a recurring cause of frustration for me when I was a fan of the show. Some of TYT's most amusing videos are when Cenk goes after right-wing pundits and blasts them for the views, but I quickly realized the weakness in these videos. Cenk would almost always twist the words of the people he argued against, creating a strawman that would be easier for him to attack. Even when arguing against people like Rush Limbaugh, Glenn Beck or Sarah Palin, who are bad enough as it is and quite easy to refute rationally, Cenk would twist their words. As a liberal I wanted him to tear them down, but I was repeatedly frustrated by him missing the mark and attacking a strawman instead.
It makes her a slut, right? Makes her a prostitute. She wants to be paid to have sex. She's having so much sex she can't afford the contraception. She wants you and me and the taxpayers to pay her to have sex.
So apparently any woman who has sex or uses contraception is a slut in Rush Limbaugh's book. And even worse, a prostitute, okay?
I kept wondering, why are you doing this, when you can easily defeat the actual argument? But in time, I've realized the sad truth. Cenk simply doesn't listen. He has a stereotype of a right-winger in his mind, basically a person with bigoted views, and anything a right-winger says will always be translated in his perception to fit that stereotype. Another one of the biggest problems with TYT is the poor amount of research they put into their stories. I've noticed it first with their videos pertaining to Israel. First of all, they would discuss every negative story about Israel that was in the news, and never discussed any positive stories. That is character assassination, another bad feature of TYT which they employ against anyone they don't like. As for the stories themselves, Cenk would always talk about them with much confidence and authority, as if he was an expert on the matter, but they were laughingly divorced from reality, and showed no effort to get to the real story. And in the end, Cenk would also patronize us Israelis and tell us what he thinks we should do in this situation which he just totally misrepresented. So now I'm going to patronize back, and say that there are quite a few other subjects that I know about more than Cenk and his gang of so-called journalists, and I've noticed that when he's talking about these subjects, he is just as full of shit. To call the tits glorified Googlers is to give them way too much credit. They don't Google. They get all the information from left-wing publications. I've realized very quickly that I need to double-check everything they tell me. I suspect that Cenk feels he is entitled to do these character assassinations, because he thinks that he is a lone voice in the wilderness. Since he hears only what he wants to hear, he is oblivious to the fact that there are many other media outlets that have a similar agenda to TYT, and thinks that the media has biases against the groups he is speaking for. Whenever one of them does something bad, Cenk rages that if it was done by one of us, the media would be much more condemning. And whenever one of us does something bad, Cenk will immediately deflect to write about how judgmental the media is in this case, compared to how soft it is when one of them commits the same transgression.
But somehow that's the fault of all blacks for not speaking out on black violence, all Muslims, all Mexicans, all minorities, but that is never transferred onto white people.
In reality, this bias is all in Cenk's head, but he feels compelled by it to represent the so-called oppressed side, and so he will look for every negative story on the people he deems as media favorites, to balance the imaginary biased field. The result is that those of us who get the news from the Young Turks are subjected to a string of character assassinations. Cenk is trying really hard to be a good man with enlightened views, but these character flaws keep bringing him and the show down. The smaller tits are too timid to call him out on it, and are usually just following his lead, confirming everything he says.
Right?
Yep.
Right.
You're right.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
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 Right?
Yes.
So unless Ben is there to give him a reality check, there's no one to rein him in.
I do not think it's all even. I definitely think they've treated him differently. I think the extent to which you have treated their coverage of them is almost as flagrant. Everyone thought you was going to lose. It's so primitive the way you look at it because it didn't fit your narrative.
Wait. I didn't see a single article
For
saying
years,
she was going to lose.
But you don't like her, so you don't look at that. You make a face, but it didn't fit your narrative, so you didn't look at it. No.
All of these defects, then, were there from the start, so if you were wondering if it was always this bad, the answer is, yes it was. And yet, the show back then was better than it is today. Why? Well, several reasons. First of all, it seemed more like a YouTube channel. There was just one main channel, on which they discussed not just politics and social issues, but also movies, sports, video games, internet memes, and other things that are popular on YouTube. In short, they offered roughly the same kind of winning mix that Philip DeFranco was offering at the time and is wisely still offering to this very day. They were also embedded in the YouTube community and talked a lot about it, and even did some fun interviews with other YouTubers.
And now, in studio, Miss Hannah Minks.
They didn't take themselves so seriously back then, so the amateurish journalism didn't matter so much. Cenk was basically this affable clown, with his silly soundboard and goofy humor, and every Friday they would put out a mix video that was a comical mix of the best moments of the week, reminding us that this was all just good fun. Also, they were very small compared to TV news networks, so we could forgive their faults and immaturity. They were an integral part of the internet's anarchic spirit. As the TYT network grew, however, things started to get worse. They've created other channels for the non-political stuff, which left the main channel for Cenk to drone on and on and on about politics. And as he felt he had more power, he decided to do something good with it, and committed the channel to the cause of getting money out of politics. They formed a super PAC for that matter, and the need to recruit money and people for the cause affected the way they covered the news. Money in politics became the root of all evil in Cenk's rhetoric, and everything was explained as stemming from it. Sometimes it would reach farcical heights, as Cenk would admit that the problem is very complicated, but then get taken by emotions and blame the politicians that they can easily solve the problem but don't do anything about it because their donors tell them not to. Meanwhile, as YouTube grew, TYT became a serious media player, and the inflated tits started to take themselves more seriously and became less playful and fun. But they did nothing to adopt more professional ethics as expected from a serious media outlet. They are still plagued by the same problems. Still, I valued what they had to say. From 2009 to 2013, liberals were occupied mainly in a struggle against the religious right, focusing on issues like pushing atheism into the mainstream, fighting for equality for minorities, especially gay rights, passing social reforms, like universal healthcare, and reforming laws about drugs. TYT were with us on these issues, and were a significant player. I kept on going to their channel on an almost daily basis, watching the headline for all the stories and sometimes watching an entire video if the subject interested me. They weren't too annoying back then. They seemed to have common sense. If you just became familiar with TYT now, go back less than 2 years and watch the video they made about Shirtstorm, and you'll be amazed by how reasonable they sounded back then. All of them, at this point, were firmly against the idiocy of the SJWs.
If you are the type of woman who will allow a shirt to prevent you from joining in on these types of jobs, then you don't deserve to work in these fields, okay? If that's all it takes, a shirt is gonna offend you to that extent. It's fucking ridiculous.
No, and I actually know this case, and I agree with your general point, but in this case, Susan Smith was almost one of the top scientists in the world, but a shirt stopped her, and so that's why, and it's the casual sexism of the shirt stopped her from being part of that project. Otherwise, she would have personally landed on the comment.
There's no way they talk like that today, is there? So what happened? Well, in the middle of 2014, a crack occurred inside the left, and it rapidly grew and became a chasm. By that time, it became apparent to liberals like me that identity politics had served their purpose. The aim of identity politics was to ensure that women, gays, and racial minorities would have equality of opportunity, by removing the cultural and systemic biases against them. By 2013, it became apparent that there was nothing more to do on this front in the West, so we shifted our focus to helping it happen in other parts of the globe, especially in the Muslim world. But for a significant part of the left, identity politics became the end instead of the means. Driven mainly by third-wave feminism, they demand not equality of opportunity but equality of outcome, and maintain that Western society is still unequal, and that it is ruled by a patriarchy of white males that wants to keep it unequal. Because of this worldview, they also view Muslims as a minority that needs protection from the patriarchy, and defend Muslim societies from those liberals who criticize it. This type of leftist is what now being termed the regressive left. Most of us expected the Young Turks to take the side of the liberals against the regressives. Based on their core principles, it seemed logical that they would update their views. But here, all of their bad habits finally came home to roost. Due to their laziness in research, the tits remained unaware of what was going on, and were still fighting the old battles. When liberals started to criticize feminism and Islam, Cenk typically did not listen to what they had to say, and instead just stereotyped them to fit with his image of a bigoted right-winger. 2 disastrous interviews he conducted at the time sealed TYT's fate. In his interviews with Sam Harris and Karen Strawn, Cenk exposed his inability to listen to and comprehend new patterns of thinking. His befuddled viewers tried to tell him how wrong he was, but Cenk refused to listen and drove them away. Where before their fanbase was a mix of different leftist views, now it became increasingly regressive, and pulled the show with it. At around the same time, TYT formed a partnership with Al Jazeera, which pushed them further into the regressive camp. And so, their videos became stupider and stupider. The funny thing is, Cenk still holds many anti-regressive views, but the constant need to defend regressive views makes him contradict himself again and again, and it's really hard to tell what he believes in anymore. He is pro-freedom of speech, but also pro-SJWs, anti-Marxist, but also pro-Black Lives Matter, against anti-Semitism, but for considering Hamas a legitimate movement. He believes a lot of the problems in the Muslim world stem from their culture, but calls anyone else who says the same thing a racist. And he is quick to claim knowledge and pass judgment on any action taken by any other country around the globe, except on the Armenian genocide on which he claims ignorance and remains silent. And so forth, creating a cognitive dissonance that is very hard to maintain. Plus, because he is unaware of the processes within the left, he genuinely doesn't get why so many people on the left have turned against him. He doesn't understand why regressives are calling him a misogynist Bernie bro for not supporting Hillary, and why liberals are accusing him of being a regressive and a Muslim apologist. He appears to be increasingly anxious and agitated, as do the rest of the sagging tits, and they don't seem to have fun anymore. I'm still watching TYT to get the headlines, but if I watch a video in full it's only to have a laugh at how stupid they are. It's really easy now to tell which videos to watch. When you see it got more downvotes than upvotes, you know that they have laid another regressive turd. 2016 was actually a good year for TYT in terms of numbers. By aligning themselves with the Bernie Sanders camp, they earned lots of new subscribers and views. They've developed an air of arrogance, believing that they are going to usurp traditional media. But if they were still connected to the YouTube community, instead of acting like they are above us, they would get the real picture. The cutting edge of the left has moved on and left them behind, and considers them a laughingstock.
Jake, you fucking idiot!
Their fanbase now is the regressive left, and it won't take long before it turns on them. Some old fans are still hoping that this will make TYT come around and join the liberal camp, but I advise you not to hold your breath. It's true that they used to be better, but the reasons for their downfall, as we have seen, are endemic to their character. TYT is a dead man walking. They just don't know it yet.